What's going on, everybody? So today you are here for what's basically become the most requested video on this channel in the last week. I literally got nothing but comment after comment asking me to make this video based on a comment that I made about Tom Morello in my last video. And obviously I mentioned Tom Morello in that video, etc. And well, now we're here. But I want to actually start by saying that this is the second time I'm making this video because I made it the first time and I felt like it was a little bit inauthentic and disingenuous. Now, I basically started off the video by saying Tom Morello is trash and going on to trash his playing, pulling up video clips of, stuff that I thought he played that was frankly trash. Quick disclaimer, in this video I will not be discussing any of Tom Morello's beliefs of him personally or his band Rage Against the Machine, and I will not be discussing my personal thoughts about him or Rage Against the Machine. This video is solely about the music and the music only. I actually thought this would be better to approach this from a personal angle because I really actually don't hate Tom Morello at all. In fact, he is one of the most influential guitar players in my entire music life ever. And Rage Against the Machine was one of the most influential bands on my own writing growing up, and it would be completely disingenuous of me to trash it for no reason just because it's cool to say something bad. Now, look, at this point in my music career, am I really into that music? Do I really want to play like Tom Morello? No, not at all. I don't really write riffs like that anymore. I've kind of grown from, thinking the scratching stuff sounds cool, etc., etc. But really, if you listen to some of my old music from the band that I was actually in, where I interviewed my manager David, and we talked about, going to Nashville and recording these records and stuff, so much of that music was heavily influenced by Rage Against the Machine. In fact, at one point we were looking at doing that record that we talked about with the producer who produced Evil Empire from Rage Against the Machine, and the only reason we didn't end up doing it was because he was in Australia, and obviously international travel would have been much more strenuous than going just, across state lines here in the United States. Needless to say, Tom Morello was incredibly influential in my music life. So I think I would like to actually do a methodical breakdown on why I think he deserves some of the shade he gets, but also what we should all take away from his playing. Now look, before I really deep dive into the subject, I'm going to also say, if you want to become one of my students, I have 2 lesson slots left. That's it. That's the cutoff. Unless I have some turnover here in the next coming months, it looks like I'm going to be stopping taking new students for the foreseeable future at the moment unless someone gives up their slot. So if you want to study with me one-on-one guitar instruction, the link's in the description below, my email, and also the pinned comment. Email me directly. State your case, why you want to study with me, and I will get back to you, and I will look forward to working with you if we're a good fit. So at the time of this video, there's only 2 spots left. I will be having some more announcements soon, coming with a little online community for you all. That is coming very soon, and I look forward to sharing that as well with all of you. So let's just jump into the subject here about Tom Morello. I first want to get it off my chest on why he gets so much shade. So look, let's just call it spade to spade. The guy is not a technically savvy musician. He doesn't really have a lot of knowledge of the instrument itself. Look, if you're going to do a guitar battle or a jam with him, he would most definitely be outshredded by the traditional standards of all music technicalities. I think he also knows that about himself.
Even that guy from Tool, who you were in a band with years ago when you were in high school.
Adam Jones, yeah.
He always jokes that you were a shitty guitar player.
I was. That's not a joke. The drama club at Libertyville High School is kind of my world. So I go into drama club. And I don't know how to play a chord on the guitar. I don't know how to play a note on the guitar. And I announce that a punk band is forming. I'm the guitar player. If you want to be in it, raise your hand, no experience required, right? So a couple hands go up, and we're a band. And now in my high school, there are 3 bands, and we're the worst. Me and Adam can't tune our fucking guitars. Like, we can't do it.
And, you know, this kind of goes to my initial arguments that I've made in other videos, right? Like, where a rock star kind of picks up an instrument at a later age. It is harder to become technically very, very sound at it at an older age. It's just the truth. That, you know, that is what happens if you don't get started at like an incredibly young age. And I've had people leave me comments that are like, oh, so you've been playing 19 years? That means you started when you were 7. Yeah, that is when I started, when I was 7. And that's, of course, my personal experience, and I'm not putting anyone down or knocking anyone for starting at a later age. We all have just life and the way it works out, you know what I mean? And of course, there are players that have picked up the instrument later in their life, like Alan Holdsworth. Like, what do I even need to say? You know what I mean? Alan Holdsworth is one of the GOATs, legend. I mean, Jimi Hendrix is another one. You know, we could say that technically picked up guitar later in life. So what am I supposed to say, right? Obviously, this is somewhat of a general statement from my own experience and being a teacher and saying stuff like this. But of course, there's exceptions to the rule always. And that doesn't mean that me saying this applies to you personally either. You might be in kind of the exception part where you're just like, hey, I picked this instrument up and I'm great at it. Fair enough. But I will say, you know, on the you know, part where we're talking about Tom Morello here, like, yeah, he picked up guitar, what would technically be considered later in life, even though he was a teenager. That is considered late by musician standards, you know, in the classical and jazz field especially. He basically goes and says, you know, hey, I couldn't really play the guitar, and you know, we couldn't even tune our guitars, and we were the worst band at our high school. To make my point with this whole argument, I think that kind of shows even now, to be honest, like, and you know, truthfully, I've never really heard him do a lot of lead playing unless he's like demoing gear, like for the Neural DSP thing, like when he has like his little demo video on YouTube, and he throws in some like blues lead lines and stuff like that, and frankly it's kind of sloppy and it's not that good. And you know, but to people like that, like aren't looking at it like me all the time, where I'm just constantly like over analyzing everyone's playing, you know, he's good enough to pass for sure to sell a plugin. Like, yeah, for sure, you know. And obviously if you're into his music, you're probably already inclined to want to buy a product from him anyways. So there's not really any shade I could throw in terms of that, other than it's like, I think he knows where he stands. I don't think he thinks he's the best. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same thing where he hasn't gone and made arrogant comments about other people. I think he knows where he stands, and I don't really see a reason for me to go and trash him further than he needs to. Than kind of what I've already said here. What, dude? Aren't you the Yngwie guy? I am the Yngwie guy. I'm the Eddie guy, I'm the Stevie guy, I'm the Jason guy, I'm the everything guy. You would probably be very surprised by what I actually like music-wise. So I actually like all music for the most part. There's not really a lot of music that I don't like. Obviously, being that this is a guitar channel and I specifically focus a lot heavily on virtuosic playing, that maybe people look past that, because I've even had students of mine where they've asked me like, hey, can I hear some of your music? Like, what was the projects you were involved in? And then I'll send them stuff and they'll be like, man, I had no idea that you just did like other kinds of music, like aside from, I thought you were in a metal band and you just shredded. It's like, no, I literally have this R&B project, I have hard rock, blues, almost like Muse sounding stuff, and I've done rap projects, so there's been a lot of different angles to my musical journey. So I think that's why I think it would be very closed-minded and frankly kind of stupid for me just to sit here and trash Tom Morello just for the sake of doing it, when he's actually had a great influence on my music career and how I play, how I think about music in general. So if I start from square one, right? The band that I was in, where I interviewed my manager, David, you know, that's on this channel. I'll link it in the description if you want to watch the interview. It's like an hour and a half. It's pretty long. That band was heavily influenced by Rage Against the Machine. And actually, my manager, David, his favorite band was Rage Against the Machine. So obviously, there was a lot of influence there at the time, and I never thought it was not cool to like Rage Against the Machine. I thought it was super cool. And I think while also Tom Morello's, lead playing, well, I'll use quotes for that for sure, because it's really subjective if you even want to classify that as lead guitar. While that totally gets shit on, his rhythm playing is really good. I think it would be disingenuous to deny how sick some of the riffs are that he has written in all rock music. Killing in the Name, Bulls on Parade, Calm Like a Bomb. He's got like Smoke on the Water riffs, dude. That's what I'm saying. Like, he's got Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin caliber of riffage. And I think he does not get enough credit for just the riffs. Because you got to understand here, in terms of like, there's only 12 notes, right, in all Western music, technically. And to write over and over again riffs that sound fresh every time is not as easy as you might think when there's only 12 notes. He's come up with a new idea every single time he writes a song, and he kind of opened my mind to like what a big riff could actually sound like with a band. You know what, I hopefully I do a good job in describing this here, but basically, like, with Rage Against the Machine was the first time I understood, like, live performance with a band, right? Watching them on stage and, seeing their momentum and how they would draw in the audience for the crowd. And then once the riff, or we could say even, like, in hip-hop terminology, like, when the beat drops for them, the crowd just goes nuts. And I remember watching that as a kid, like watching their footage and stuff like that, and like literally watching crowds like explode as soon as they, started playing like a Bomb Track or something. Anytime they would like build the riff up and then it would drop into like the 4 on the floor groove, that to me was like maybe the most epic thing I've ever seen from any rock band ever. And to me, every band after them essentially copied the same formula. You would have the build up, where it's kind of like maybe the snares just doing snare rolls, and then they kind of like build it up, and then the beat drops, and then you're in like this huge riff, the crowd's going crazy, jumping, the mosh pit's going. Like, to me, they mastered a formula of understanding how audiences work, especially in a live setting. Because even like if you listen to it in your car, it's like, man, this thing just sounds huge. The crazy thing about Tom Morello, his amp tone, is that it actually doesn't sound that huge by itself. It's the fact that they just layered and layered and layered multiple guitar tones on top of each other to get this huge wall of sound. And, that heavily influenced the music I wrote at the time. I wanted all my riffs to sound like that. If you listen to my old music, I mean, you'll literally hear like, damn, this dude's influenced by Rage Against the Machine. I mean, literally, like every show that we would do, someone would come up to me and be like, man, is your favorite guitar player Tom Morello? I'm like, pretty much. And that was at that time, obviously. That was the phase of life I was in with my musical journey. And maybe, some people might laugh at this, obviously. Dude, all you do is just talk about shredding. Yeah, I do that. There's more to music than just that, too. And definitely at this phase of my life, I was not even really playing that many guitar solos. I was really just into, like, writing cool riffs. And obviously bands that came after them that mastered kind of the same types of sounds with their writing was, Korn, Limp Bizkit, obviously, and Muse. I would say Muse definitely influenced by Rage Against the Machine. Royal Blood, probably, even though they're just bass and drums, definitely influenced by Rage Against the Machine. And obviously, you're not going to like all the bands I just mentioned on the list. I realize that. Like Limp Bizkit, I know probably there's a very, very high amount of people that do not like that band. But I would also be lying if I didn't say that I actually like Wes Borland's guitar playing. I think he's a very interesting player. Matt Bellamy, one of my favorite guitar players ever. Probably the heaviest usage of effects and pedals live and in the studio out of any guitar player on this list. Definitely influenced by Tom Morello, but also has his own style. He is kind of on the other end of the spectrum for me a little bit because he also plays piano. He's the singer. He's just an all-around super talented musician. And his playing obviously is a little bit more in depth than someone like Tom Morello. He's got the riffs, but he also understands harmony, how to write melody, etc., right? So there's levels to this thing. One isn't just bad and the other one's good. It can't be black and white like that. So then, if we talk about Tom Morello's lead playing, it is kind of gimmicky, I'm not going to lie. But let's look at it for the time period they came out with. Look, I think in everyone's mind, everyone wants music to be timeless. And I think the best music is timeless. But also, I think we have to sometimes look at something that would have been a product of the time. And that's not always a bad thing. Now, if you look at the time that Rage Against the Machine came out, which I think is 91, I want to say they came out like the same year as Nirvana. What was going on at that time? Well, you had the rise of hip-hop music. You weren't even quite in the golden age of hip-hop yet. You would have been coming off of NWA, Public Enemy, Big L, I think, would have been out maybe right around that time. It was kind of coming from like the super old school, what we consider now super old school, to in the golden age. We got Nas, Biggie, Tupac, and they were like right before that, kind of right in the middle of it. And the Chronic, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, would have come out 93. So everything's kind of like coming out right at the same time. And you got a guy like Tom Morello that happens to be right in the middle of the zeitgeist. And I think that's an important thing to notate because there's a quote by Steve Vai, and I can't always say that I actually agree with this quote, but in this case, it probably makes the most sense. And Steve Vai says, hey, if you're not good at a certain thing, lean into what you are good at. Lean into your strengths. And I actually don't fully agree with this notion. Most of the time I would say, no, if you're good at something, you should actually lean into the thing you're not good at so you can get better at it and become the best at that other thing while still maintaining how good you are at another thing, right? And that's probably more of like the competitive part of me in terms of guitar playing, the sport-like mentality, right? But I think in this case, Steve Vai is actually right in terms of someone like Tom Morello, because I think Tom Morello probably had this realization at the young age of him starting to play guitar in his teenage years and probably realizing, hey, I'm not that good. I don't know if I'm going to get better at this thing or good enough to be maybe like a Steve Vai or something like that. And for him, you also got to keep in mind his influence wasn't just shred guys. It's like he's influenced by punk rock and he's influenced by rap primarily. In the moment of capturing the zeitgeist, what would have been a more perfect route for him to take in that moment when the two genres of music have essentially hit their peaks at the same time, right? You have punk rock forming, out of the hardcore era into grunge. Nirvana becomes the biggest band ever at that time. And you have rap starting to also take its peak, going into the golden age with Nas, Biggie, Tupac, etc. So you have these two genres hitting their peaks almost at the same time, and you got this one guy right in the middle who really isn't, amazing at shredding, and he also is into punk and rap. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. And frankly, I think Tom Morello did a good job at like emulating a lot of the sounds he was hearing. Obviously, a lot of the high-pitched stuff with the whammy pedal. I mean, he's pretty much the one who invented a lot of that stuff. You could say Dimebag Darrell was doing it too. But Tom Morello really kind of turned it into what we think of it now as being a whammy pedal. Like, I feel like now if you think of a whammy pedal, you're immediately going to think Tom Morello. I think in this case, he did a good job capturing a lot of the sounds. Like, you definitely hear a lot of that West Coast rap influence in his guitar playing with Dr. Dre's kind of high-pitched synth sounds that he used. He emulates that with the whammy pedal. Obviously, a lot of wah pedal stuff. The DJs at the time did a lot of the wah-wah stuff. Even if you listen actually to, I know this is like a kind of an out there one, but if you listen to Beastie Boys, what is it, 3 MCs and 1 DJ, that's the name of the song. The beginning of the song literally has a scratch DJ solo with the wah-wah on the DJ track. So there was a lot of that going on at the time. Now, I feel like there's a lot less of that going on now in hip-hop, but that was a huge deal in the early 90s for sure. But I think he did a good job being creative with what he had at the time, capturing the zeitgeist. Now, is it timeless? Like, has anyone ever successfully done this style of playing after him? I would say probably not. I think most of the bands that tried to kind of copy him back in the day, like I said, Limp Bizkit, Korn, which Korn has had a good career, but there's a lot of other bands. Like, I do feel like they kind of ended up being a product of the time, obviously. Like, you think of those bands, you just think, oh, everything sounded like that in the 90s, right? And Tom Morello's playing, you know, when you hear him try to do stuff in Audio Slave later, I definitely feel like it doesn't fit that well, truthfully. I mean, not the rhythm playing, obviously, but more the lead stuff. Like, when he does the solo on Like a Stone, I mean, to me, I would have envisioned like David Gilmour type of solo or something, you know, not this weird like whammy thing. And it's like very obvious, you know, hey, Tom Morello has entered the room, you know, so I think, but again, he's got great riffs, you know what I mean? It's like a trade-off. It's like one or the other. And I think his riffs are underrated, like a lot. It's up, for me, it's up there with like Jimmy Page, Richie Blackmore, Black Sabbath. You know what I mean? Like, some people might get pissed off that I'm relating Rage Against the Machine riffs to those bands, but to me, they're in that league. That's how iconic those riffs are. So I was gonna make a video like totally hating on Tom Morello, I guess, for no reason, because you guys requested it. And it's like, to some extent, he kind of deserves it, because like, yeah, okay, his lead playing definitely is not that good. But look, he's got something to offer. Again, I would be disingenuous to say that his playing did not have something to offer. He heavily influenced my music, and there'd be a lot of stuff that I never thought to do without listening to him play. So while he doesn't really influence me now, and I don't really listen to his music now, you know, he definitely had a heavy hand in how I choose to write music when I was younger. So, and honestly, I feel like all things that influence you musically kind of do stick with you, even if you're not actively listening at the time. I don't know, that's my 2 cents. You know, sorry to disappoint everybody that wanted the rage bait, but yeah, it's just, I can't, you know what I mean? I can't if it's not authentic, you know what I mean? So anyways, if you want lessons from me, you want to be one of those final 2 students, hit me in the email below. I'll get back to you. Sign up for the free monthly newsletter, and stay tuned for the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.